In this video, we are looking at summary of Samskara, Rite of the Dead Man. So, here we go with the story. The story opens on a midsummer day in Agrahara, a colony of the Brahmins in the village Durvasapur. The village is seemed to be affected by plague and people are dying in great number. As Praneshacharya is about to sit to his midday meal, Chandri comes and informs that Naranappa died of plague. He is a relative of Praneshacharya and mainly known as opponent to religion, tradition and rituals. He violated all the restrictions imposed on the Brahmins. Therefore, he is virtually an excommunicated man. Anyways, according to the convention, the Brahmins do not eat from the time they hear the news of someone's death until the sanskara of the person is performed. So, Praneshacharya does not dine. And other Brahmins in Agrahara who come to know the news also stop eating. And they assemble at Praneshacharya to decide as to whom will perform the funeral ceremony and how to perform it. The question was that Naranappa was almost an outcast, and it was to be known that whether he is entitled to Brahmanic rites of cremation. It's seen that Naranappa lived alone after his wife died, and Garudacharya and Lakshmanacharya are his near relatives. Although all kinds of relations between them has been snapped. However, at the present time they are also seen to be waiting for the verdict of Praneshacharya. They said that Naranappa violated Brahmanism by living with a low caste mistress, eating meat with Muslims, disrespecting the Brahmins of Agrahara, and insulting their faith by fishing and eating the sacred fish of the Ganesh temple, which is one of the incarnation of God. He also spoiled the youth of Agrahara. Due to this, he was almost excommunicated. But he was clever enough to threaten them, saying that he would convert to Islam if they excommunicate him. Hence, he was not excommunicated while he was alive. And because of these reasons, Garuda and Lakshmana were not willing to perform his final rites. Seeing the unending arguments among the Brahmins and the dead body rotting and emitting nauseating smell, Chandri, in the need of help, presents her ornaments and asks them to sell them to meet the expenses of the funeral. At the sight of gold, the wives of both Garuda and Lakshmana whisper them to take the ornaments and perform the samskara, that is, funeral rites. In the course of the meeting and discussion, Praneshacharya, who is expected to guide others in such matters, tries to overlook books of Shruti and Smriti, but he finds no answer to the present problem. Yet, he cannot waive his responsibility as being a more learned judge in religious and social matters. He is a selfless server as opposed to the other corrupt Brahmins. At this point, the author has aimed at exposing the corrupt lives of these Brahmins of Samarth or Madhavas. But Praneshacharya is a good-natured among them. He is compassionate to the highs and the lows alike. He admires the purity of Chandri's heart and generous gesture in offering her gold for performing the funeral rites of her late lover. In the past, there had been encounters between Praneshacharya and Naranappa. Praneshacharya has promised Naranappa's mother that he would restore his son to the normal path of virtue. And he tried also, but was in vain. There used to be clashes between them. Making it more difficult, Naranappa raised a banner of rebellion against the Brahmins. Because of the hollowness and hypocrisy, as most of the clan was following blindlessly unholy greed and hatred of Garuda, meaninglessness of Lakshmana, and the hypocrisy of Durga Bhatta, the only worshipper of Shiva. As an insider, Praneshacharya holds a mirror to his community to mend their ways or bring down the structure of Brahmanhood on their heads. Under this background, the cremation of Naranappa is stuck, and until the funeral was done, they were not to eat according to Shastra. In that summer, any delay would involve in decomposition of the body, and the hungry Brahmins in the agrahara felt upset. Nevertheless, searching for the solution, Praneshacharya tries to discover his inner identity, and this is the theme of the novel. When Brahmins of Durvaspura find no answer from Praneshacharya, they go to Parijatapura and ask Manjaya, the friend of Naranappa, to perform the funeral. But Manjaya was not ready to do that. He said he would bear the expenses but could not perform the last rites as he was not a Brahmin. Disheartened, the Brahmins come back and they learn that Praneshacharya has gone to the nearby Maruti temple to seek divine guidance. Before going, he gives Chandri's ornaments back to her and then proceeds. He takes bath in the river with wet cloths on his body. He prays Hanuman till evening, expecting a sign from the deity, yet he could not get any sign. Till then, Chandri waits outside the temple for the Acharya. After her long wait, Praneshacharya comes out disappointed and exhausted. Chandri, waiting outside, fell at his feet, and her breasts accidentally touched Praneshacharya's knees. At this point, he could not stand on the account of physical hunger and spiritual disillusionment. Hence, they get physical. With this, the first part of the novel ends here. The second part of the novel begins with Praneshacharya's awakening in the forest. Praneshacharya asks Chandri that she should announce to the Agrahara Brahmins what happened between them in the forest near the temple. He now tells the Brahmins that he was left with no authority to guide them in the present problem, as he was not qualified to quote any Shastra in the matter. Thus, saying this, he felt like he was freed from a great load off his shoulders. Turning to Chandri, Praneshacharya asked her to go with him to Agrahara, but she refused. Instead, she straight went to Naranappa's house because she could not stand Naranappa's body rotting and stinking. She manages to cremate it with the help of a Muslim fish merchant by name Ahmad Bari, whom late Naranappa had helped in difficult times. But the Agrahara people do not know about this. While at Parijatpura, the friends of Naranappa were practicing rehearsal, where he always used to be. Naranappa not only helped them, but participated in the performance of drama. When they get to know about Naranappa, they decide to cremate him. But when they reach the house, they found no dead body in it. Thinking that the body must have walked out, they returned home because of fear. The daily scene of the Agrahara at night was that there was a mad widow, Lakshmi Devamma. She was shrieking in the night. The Brahmins in the Agrahara therefore did not open their doors in the night. On the other side, Praneshacharya is now unsteady while giving the daily dose of medicine to his handicapped wife, and he dreams where he is trying to save himself from falling into the hell. At this point, he sees his flat-chested, lean, and skinny wife as an unwanted thing, and remembers he was 16 and she was 12 when they got married. After the marriage, he had gone to Banaras to become great scholar in the scriptures, and after returning, he gladly engaged himself in nursing his wife and lived an ascetic life. He was proud of his celibacy, which he was maintaining till then. But now his condition is like he was at the age of 16. So when the Brahmins came to him for the guidance, he asked them to do what they liked. He found no clues in the scriptures and said he was not a superhuman but a common man like them. He then called out Chandri, but there was no Chandri to be found. He wanted Chandri should tell the Brahmins what they did near the temple, because he had no courage to tell them himself. He did not want to blast the trust that the Brahmins had kept in him. Yet, he is subject to conflict on account of his guilty conscience. The enjoyment that he got from Chandri begins to come to his mind again and again, and he begins to think of her again. He left desire, but desire did not leave him. He wondered how he became the victim of desire, in spite of his austerity. The Brahmins of Durvaspura were not satisfied by Praneshacharya. His absence in Agrahara astonished them. So, they set out to Kaimara to meet Subhanacharya. But he too said he could not guide them in the matter. He had no knowledge as to guide in the matter of funeral rites in such exceptional cases. He admitted for not being as capable as Praneshacharya. They then decide to see if the chief preceptor for the Brahmins is staying in the monastery. On their way, a member among them, called Dasacharya, developed fever, to such an extent that he lost his consciousness. So they left him behind and went to Guru, the chief preceptor, and explained to him their problem and difficulty. The chief preceptor at once asked them to burn the dead body without delay, and the property of Naranappa should be given to the mutt, because he was hireless. The Brahmins left the mutt after taking the ceremonial meal, as they had not taken meal since 2 days. Again, one more Brahmin among them, Gundacharya, also fell ill. So, other Brahmins returned to Durvaspura, leaving Gundacharya there. At Praneshacharya's end, we see that he goes to swim in the river. It reminds him of his childhood days when he used to go to swim in spite of his mother's objection to do that. After swimming, he used to lie on the warm sand. And once again, the warmth of the sand at the river bed reminded him of the warmth of Chandri's body. He went to the spot where he had the union with her. He saw the pressed green grass where they had lain. He plucked the grass and smelt it. He then thought of the world of nature and its functions, which is difficult to alter. He then come back home, where Bhagirathi has become a victim of plague, and she died soon. Following this, he cremates her and sets off to the east without thinking of his house or agrahara, where death in the form of plague was active. The mutt had honored him with 15 lace embroidered shawl and 200 rupees and a gold necklace, given to him for his erudition and forensic skill. So, he left them behind in the deserted house and left the agrahara once for all. And this is how the second part of the novel ends. The third part of the novel describes Praneshacharya's wanderings. Praneshacharya went on where the path led him, and where his legs carried him. Yet he thought of going to Kundapur and see Chandri there, because Chandri now began living with her parents. However, he continues. While on his way, a villager saw him and recognized him to be a great learned Brahmin, and gave him ration so that he could cook. When Praneshacharya refused to do so, the villager gave him fruit. He thought the Acharya was a mendicant Brahmin seeking alms. When he went further, he met a young man, Putta, belonging to Malaria caste. He gave company to Praneshacharya to Kundapur. Putta was talkative, and he would continuously ask questions and tell readers, and expect solutions from him. The Acharya did not give him any trace of his identity. There was a fair and festival at Meligo in the name of local deity. Putta took the Acharya to the fair. Here, Acharya saw the decorated temple chariot surrounded by a large crowd offering worship to it. The crowd was in festive mood. There was a cockfight going on. At the other place, a young girl was performing acrobatics on a bamboo pool. Even here, the Acharya was attracted to the serpentine curves of the acrobatic girl and was reminded of Chandri's charms. Then, Putta takes him to a restaurant and got him a cup of coffee. and from there to the house of a young woman called Padmavati living in a farmhouse. Padmavati was very charming, and Putta asked him to stay with women for the night, and the next morning they would go to Kundapur. Putta told Padmavati that the Acharya would come back after dinner, and he took him to the temple premise where arrangement of free meal was for the Brahmins. At the temple, the Acharya ate ceremonial meal. His neighbor introduced himself and told him that he had a young girl of marriageable age, and sought help from Acharya that he might suggest the places if he knew any. The cook serving the meal recognizes Praneshacharya after some hard thinking and proceeds to inform the in charge of the free board about the presence of the great Praneshacharya. When Acharya comes to know it, he stopped eating and rushed out. Putta catches him and asks him to come with him to Padmavati's house, but Praneshacharya overcomes his temptation and decides to return to Durvaspura and tell the truth to the Brahmins and complete the Samskara for Naranappa, because he wanted to overcome his fear of the society for transgressing its codes. So, he tells Putta that he had to return to his village as a relative of his was very serious. Putta offered to accompany him as he wanted to meet his friend Naranappa, whom he knew very well. Praneshacharya did not tell him about Naranappa's death, otherwise he thought it would create complications. As they proceeded by the road, a bullock cart going to Durvaspura offered to take one of them. Putta asked the Acharya to go by the cart, and Putta himself took the way to Trithali, where his wife stayed with her parents. Praneshacharya travels to Durvaspura with anxious expectations, not at all knowing what had happened at the village. And this is how the novel ends. The end of the novel still does not bring a resolution to Praneshacharya's journey. His extreme asceticism has blinded him to the physical enjoyment of the world outside of his rigid rituals and cleansing baths. What begins as a samskara for the dead man becomes a samskara or a rite of passage into a wholly different cycle of life for Praneshacharya. With this ends today's video. If you enjoyed, then please support me by clicking like and subscribe icon. Thanks for listening and see you soon in the next one.